This is my 1994 Lexus SC400. This car is the main focus of this channel, and you've been along for the ride for most of the projects we've done on it. It has a 4-liter 1UZ V8, making 250 horsepower and about 260 torque, mated to a 4-speed automatic slush box from the 90s. Super comfortable? Yes. Reliable? Definitely. Fun to drive? That one's kind of arguable. So, I manual swapped it. I enlisted the help of my friend Steven to get this project done. Now I work in New York City on the weekdays, and I didn't really have the time, the tools, or the space to complete something like this, so I asked him for his assistance, considering the fact that he had this exact same transmission in his SC400 before he 1J swapped it. We work on different schedules, so he would work on the car whenever he had time, and I would stop by whenever I was free to give him a helping hand. This resulted in a lot of missing footage, so I'll do the best I can to explain the missing gaps. In the summer of 2018, I decided to pull the trigger and purchase all the parts that would convert my 4-speed automatic SC400 to a 5-speed manual one. More specifically, a 5-speed manual from a Nissan 240SX. I purchased the adapter plate, the pressure plate, the transmission, the flywheel, and the drive shaft from Steven, since those were the exact same parts he used in his previous swap. Everything else I purchased from online sources. Here's how it went. First things first, remove the hood. Let me tell you though, this thing was really heavy. About 61 pounds according to the Lexus forums. It's pretty simple though. We just unbolted the hood struts from the hood and leaned it against the wall for the duration of the project. The next day, the motor needed to be prepped for removal. I disconnected the fuel lines leading to and from the engine, and Steven disconnected the radiator, the vacuum hoses, the power steering hoses, and anything else that would prevent the engine from coming out. The ECU harness was also unplugged from the ECU and removed through the firewall. The next day, by the time I arrived at Steven's, the engine had already been out. I was too late to record it, but here is a cinematic shot of the leaky, oily motor out of the car. While the motor was getting prepped for a refresh, we scuffed up my new-to-me Hurricane long tube headers, and I sprayed them in a coat of VHT header paint to give them that factory look. Time to refresh the motor. We took off the valve covers, removed the old gaskets, cleaned them with the degreaser, and gave them a nice spray of VHT metallic red. We also sprayed the intake manifold with the same VHT header paint to get it also looking nice and new. I was pretty much on painting duty for the next few days. With the motor out, my friend Nico from Nico Car Care stopped by to detail it for me and made it look brand spanking new. He brought it from this gunky mess to an engine bay you can eat off of. No regrets. If you guys are in the tri-state area, definitely check out his detailing shop. Meanwhile, it was time to install a new valve cover gasket kit. Same thing with the motor mounts. I got a pair of polyurethane engine mounts from Excessive Manufacturing. After getting both valve covers installed, Steven installed the new starter and then reinstalled the intake manifold. We also replaced the factory original crank pulley with a brand new one from Lexus. Before that though, we noticed that the front main seal had seen better days, so that got replaced, as well as the timing belt and the water pump. On the back side of the motor, in went a new rear main seal before Steven bolted up the flywheel, installed the pilot bushing adapter, and bolted up an adapter plate, all from Collins. And with that, the motor is ready to go. Now, let's move to the transmission. This KA trans was sitting for a while, so we cleaned the mating surface where the shifter would sit. I went with the ISR short shifter, mainly because it's what we had laying around, but also because it's got pretty good reviews from the S13 community. Initially, I used a full-face street spec clutch from ACT. That was later swapped out for a Competition 2 full face. While the motor was out, I decided to upgrade the ground wires with new 0-gauge cable, because why not? I also installed new sway bar polyurethane bushings since it was easy to access. Then, while I was at work, the headers and the transmission were bolted up to the motor, and by the time I stopped by Stevens, all that was left to do was push the whole thing into place. The hardest part of all of this was getting the motor mount to line up with the holes in the subframe. After that, I modified my automatic brake pedal to clear the clutch pedal and snaked the engine harness back through the firewall into the car. Underneath, we bolted up the transmission crossmember loosely so it would hold the weight and prevent the motor mount and motor from experiencing added stress. I then went inside of the car, removed the center console, and started undoing all of the bolts for the automatic transmission shifter. After all the bolts came out, I slid under the car and I cut the boot, holding the auto shift lever in place. Then I removed the shifter from the top side. And would you look at that? So much room, and the shifter lines up perfectly with the stock hole. With that done, we bolted the transmission crossmember in place and got the custom one-piece drive shaft ready. I purchased a new guibo from Japan for much less than what Lexus was charging, and the drive shaft was bolted back in. The next evening, it was time to start adding fluids back into the motor. On first startup, we checked for leaks and let the paint bake onto the headers for the first time. I filled up the transmission with Redline MT90 through the shifter hole, about 2.5 quarts. We installed the inner boot for the shifter to reduce road noise and heat, and then took the car off the jack stands. Then we finally went for a short test drive. This was the most exciting day for me in a long time. I had a working manual swapped car, and the best part, it worked on the first try. There was just one problem though, no working speedometer. Here's the thing, as far as I know, the Toyota Vehicle Speed Sensor, or VSS, is a digital 3-wire setup, while the Nissan VSS is a 2-wire one. So I had a couple options. Use a decoded digital box or purchase a GPS speedometer adapter. I decided to go with the GPS adapter from Autometer for 2 reasons. 1, it was much easier and simpler to wire up, and 2, it doesn't matter what my wheel and tire size is since it gets its signal from GPS. All I had to do was wire up the adapter to ignition power, ground, and the signal wire spliced into pin 13 of the middle plug behind the cluster. And once again, that was the right combo, and it worked on the first try. It's been 1.5 years since we've manual swapped this car, and I've got to say it's one of the best mods I've ever done to it. It's way more fun to drive, it's super responsive, it sounds great, and it turns heads. But that's not without its faults. Since we've manual swapped this car, I've blown up a transmission, destroyed a clutch plate, and I've had a few throttle bearing noises that crept up on me. However, even with all these issues, I would recommend manual swapping your car if you have the means to do so. In the next video, I'm gonna go over the parts list to get this project done, as well as some of the issues Steven and I encountered after we did the manual swap, as well as what we did to solve those issues. Also, my friends over at F90 Garage just came out with a video that features me as well as my car, so if you'd like to check that out, the link is in the description. Till then, I'll catch you guys next time.